solid verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, we have a national champion.
Man.
Congratulations to the 16-0 Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah.
27-21. Indiana completes the perfect season, completes the storybook ending, completes the national championship for the first time ever in the history of the football program, going into the belly of the beast, winning this one in Hard Rock Stadium in Miami on a historic evening in South Florida. The Indiana Hoosiers get it done, my friend. Welcome back.
Think about how ridiculous that sounds.
The
Indiana Hoosiers get it done in the national championship. The college football playoff national championship, the Indiana Hoosiers. It's unbelievable.
I'm a little bit speechless. I mean, there's two components to this.
Yeah.
There's the whole element of needing to suspend disbelief for a minute.
Yep.
In order to talk about the game at hand. And so I think in order to do the game justice, in order to do what Indiana did justice, we need to focus on that, and we can circle back around and put this in historical context.
Please.
Put this in solid verbal content, whatever version of that we want. We'll get to that a little bit later on. Please hit follow. Please hit subscribe. Both our voices are a little bit raspy. We just did a 3-hour and 45-minute live stream,
Loved
a
it.
watch along throughout the course of this game. We would love to have you along with us for the remainder of this now off season as we go over to 2 episodes per week, Dan Rubenstein. But 27-21, man, we both were sort of close with our final score prediction. Mine was 31-20. I think yours was 28-17. So we were in the neighborhood.
Yep.
Let's start at the very top here.
Yes.
We talked in the preview about our keys to victory for both Miami and Indiana. I think to our credit, in both cases, both teams tried to do kind of what we said we thought they might try to do, but Indiana was just a little bit better around the edges, just a little bit better on the margins. That's ultimately how they got this dub. So why don't we start here at the top? I'll kick it over to you. I've been talking too much, and I got to conserve the pipes.
Yeah.
What stood out to you in this win for Indiana, and how'd they get it done?
Indiana just consistently stayed in it, right? Even when the offense wasn't there, even when the running game wasn't there, because they were being walloped up front by Miami's extraordinary front on defense. Indiana stayed the course. They made plays in huge moments. Obviously, the Fernando Mendoza play, obviously the blocked punt for a touchdown play, obviously the game-sealing interception. And in those huge moments when it looked like Miami would be able to get off the field, they were committing penalties, multiple penalties on those drives, right? It's the story of being buttoned up or being a little bit less than buttoned up in special teams with turnovers, in high leverage moments, not committing penalties. I'm sure Miami fans are yelling at their AirPods or car stereos or whatever speaker they're listening to this, or YouTube, whatever, saying there should have been 37 called holds on the Indiana offensive line with Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor wreaking havoc. Hold on. And to that I say, you're probably right. I am not going to tell you you're wrong for being but I'm also going to tell you, if you bathe in that was a hold jacuzzi, you'll never be satisfied watching this sport. No. But you're probably right. I'm just telling you that the penalties weren't great. Miami got away with a blatant defensive holding that wasn't called, I believe, in the defensive backfield on an Indiana player running a route. You can't live in that space. You got to live in the, here's what we can control, here's what we can't control. Don't grab face masks and get creative on third down, fourth down. You got to execute. You can't make killer mistakes. And Indiana was the team to pounce in those moments. And It was a weird game. We're still talking about a game in which Miami's offense outscored Indiana's offense, correct? 21-20?
Yep. They had more total yardage as well.
Yes.
In this game. I mean, it was just a couple key moments that we can get into and we can talk a little bit more about that. That swung the balance of this one. By the way, if you bet on Miami plus the points,
Yep.
you came away the victor here. It was a little bit uncertain to me through that first half what version of Miami we were going to see in the second, because there wasn't a whole lot of creativity with the play calling. They really did try to run the Mario Cristobal version of Big Dumb Mario Ball, where it was a lot of, 3 yards in a cloud of dust trying to bully guys at the line. To their credit, they were able to bully the Indiana offensive line.
But they also went away from Mark Fletcher for a stretch.
They went away from Mark Fletcher, but I think what I'm getting at is we did see more creativity as the game wore on.
Yes.
And certainly what we saw in the third and fourth quarter from the Miami offense was a far cry from what we saw in the first half. So, they did make some adjustments, and they did get themselves back into this game. Granted, in the very beginning, I wasn't sure which way this thing was going to go. The defense was doing its part. The offense just, there was nothing there. But in the second half, they did come to play.
Yeah. So look, it's Miami starting out the game abhorrent on third downs. It's 5 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out in the first quarter. And that's 3 and out, 5 yards, 3 and out, -7 yards, another 3 and out in their first full drive in the second quarter. And they doink the field goal before the half. Indiana did not play a perfect game. They kept things pretty conservatively for stretches, running the ball into traffic without getting terribly creative themselves on offense. The back shoulder throws largely didn't seem to be part of the offense until they were.
Yeah.
There wasn't a ton of, Omar Cooper and Charlie Becker and Elijah Surratt making huge plays like they were able to come through doing time after time this season until later on in the game, until some of those high leverage moments. We actually saw a dropped, I think it was Elijah Surratt pass, which is like seeing a unicorn riding the chupacabra, right? It's pretty rare. So it wasn't it wasn't a clean eat off the floor game for Indiana. And again, the linebackers early on were incredible for Miami. Obviously the defensive line incredible for Miami. The abuse that Fernando Mendoza was taking throughout this game, right? Just hit on the chin, not called, I don't believe. And he was bleeding. Like, it wasn't a perfect game. It wasn't a clean game. The difference in this game was Indiana was better prepared in that first half to continue going. And finding, excavating, turning over rocks to find a little bit of creativity, to find third down conversions. I know at one point Miami was 0 for what on third down?
It was like 0 for 6 or 0 for 7. Yeah.
Right.
It took a while for them to get one.
There was an arrhythmic quality, and we're not giving any credit right now to the Indiana defense, which deserves a ton of credit, especially the secondary. A big part of this game was both ways. They were letting these teams get grabby. They were letting these teams fight. They were letting these defensive backs grab fistfuls of jersey. And it's okay, I guess, if it's called both ways, but there has to be that line of like, this is okay when you have the mutual hand fighting or whatever, but this is the line where it's unacceptable. And we found that line, and in Miami did get called for something at some point, but it was an extraordinarily physical game. And ultimately, once again, it's Indiana being the more buttoned up team in all three phases that made the difference to me.
I think that's right. And a couple things stand out to me on the Indiana side.
Please.
One of the keys to the game that we focused on when we did our preview was pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And how Miami has these two edge rushers in Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, who are going to come screaming off the edge. And though it's an Indiana line that was very difficult to confuse, that was a matchup. It was an interesting matchup to watch. And I think by and large, that Miami defensive front got the better of the Indiana offensive line. Not every play, but we saw as the game wore on, they were starting to get some sacks. They were starting to push that line back into Mendoza.
Oh, I think what Indiana did was in spite of getting absolutely smashed up front on offense.
They got smashed up front. And I mean, what Kalon Black did on the ground is going to be overshadowed in this game.
Tough yards. Yeah.
But he got some tough yards for them on the ground, set them up a couple times in some high leverage key situations. They were able to get enough out of him, out of Roman Hemby down the stretch to have some semblance of a ground game to keep Miami a little bit off balance. But in terms of that pressure, Miami had it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we saw develop over the course of this game was Indiana realizing we're not necessarily going to be able to block these guys. We got to get the ball out quick.
Mm-hmm.
And so we saw a lot of that RPO stuff that they have run a lot of this year. This wasn't new for their playbook, but we saw a lot of the quick stuff, a lot of quick hitches, a lot of quick outs, a lot of quick stuff to get the ball out of Fernando Mendoza's hands as quickly as possible. And so I think that worked to pretty good effect on the Indiana side. It kept drives alive. It kept things going. They were able to kind of nickel and dime their way down the field. They had a couple big plays here and there, but by and large, that was their MO for moving the football against this Miami front. And so it wasn't necessarily them figuring it out along the line, but it was a schematic choice that allowed them to extend drives. And then we saw that again. We're going to bring this up, I think, in perpetuity, but the big call, Fernando Mendoza, it's 4th and 5. He's 12 yards away. They call a timeout. What are they going to do? Are they going to go for it? Are they not going to go for it? They run a quarterback draw. He runs it in for a touchdown. Gets beaten up on his way in. But again, if you listen to Curt Cignetti talk about the play call after the fact, this was something they saw on tape. This was something they saw in this game. The coverage scheme that they were seeing on the Miami side, they rolled the dice that they were going to see it again. They guessed right.
Mm-hmm.
He runs
it
in.
Just installed it. Yeah.
Just installed it. So I think the big takeaway from this is going to be, as you pointed out, Miami not getting it done on the margins, Indiana maybe executing a little bit better in some of those key moments.
Mm-hmm.
But I think by and large, the chess match that everybody likes to refer to, Indiana won that too in just a couple spots. They made a couple moves that set them up later in the game that turned this thing on its ear. Of course, there was a big block punt, which we can talk about, but there were a couple other really high leverage moments that Indiana was able to win, either because of their scheme, because of their skill, because of their discipline, whatever you want to call it. It was just a few of those moments on the margins that gave them this national championship.
Yeah, a couple drives that I thought stood out to me from the Indiana defense and the stops that they got. It was a nearly 6-minute drive for Miami before the half that ended up in that doinked field goal. One of the things we had talked about before was Miami can't afford to end a long drive with nothing in this game because Indiana is too adept at generating their own longer drives. And obviously on that point, Indiana couldn't afford to do that either. And I don't believe they did. Did they have any long drives that ended in nothing? Indiana.
I mean, Indiana had drives of, let's see here.
They had a 6-minute drive for the field goal. They had a nearly 7-minute drive for the touchdown. But they had a couple punt drives that were like 3 minutes, but nothing like 5 minutes plus.
Everything that went over 4 minutes amounted in points.
Right. And so that was the doink that they couldn't finish that drive before the half. And I think it was attempted with 30 or 40 seconds left. And then after the long Mark Fletcher run, I believe with all the stadium going crazy, right? It's the semi-home crowd, whatever you want to say it, but it's obviously, in terms of comfort, a semi-home game for Miami and very much a road environment for Indiana. Indiana follows that up by forcing a 3-and-out. I think they allowed a yard on that drive. So Indiana bowing up when there is an electricity in the air after that Mark Fletcher run, I thought was enormous. Obviously coming up with the turnover at the end of the game to seal things, clearly huge. But I have nothing but respect and was so impressed with Miami knowing they had to do something to open things up and opening it up, getting creative with Malachi Toney in the second half, leaning on Mark Fletcher. Obviously, the long run helped everything, but you can't overcome a bad half of football in a game this big against a team this good. Or not football, a bad half of offense in a game this big.
No, I mean, I think that,
or at least
completely
it's really
tracks.
tough. Yeah.
It's really tough. And so I listen, you got to credit the Indiana defense for the job that it did in this game, because for the vast majority of it, if you watch any of like the Skycast from behind Carson Beck had no one to throw to.
No,
nobody was open. I mean, this Indiana zone defense did a really good job covering deep pass plays. We saw them try to take some shots a little bit later on. Keelan Marion almost reeled one in later in the game, which was, I mean, it would have been an incredible moment. So they were trying down the stretch, but This is just such a disciplined zone that Indiana runs. And there were many instances where they were just dropping 8 guys. They knew Carson Beck really wasn't going to run for it. They weren't worried about his legs. They were dropping 8, and you could see him progressing through, trying to get to his 1, trying to get to his 2. With time. They were giving him time. They were just content to play their zone coverage. And by and large, they did a good enough job containing him. Now, Mark Fletcher still served as a bit of a catalyst on the ground. 17 carries, 112 yards. Of course, the big one was a 57-yard touchdown run. And then he followed that up a little bit later with another touchdown run. He had 2 on the day.
A beautiful play call in that one where they used Malachi Tony as a decoy and 2 Indiana dudes followed him. Yeah,
absolutely. But I think we came to a point in this one where they just couldn't rely on Fletcher the entire way. And especially down the stretch, as the clock is winding down, you can't hand the ball off. You're out of timeouts. You got to find a way to move the ball down the field. And again, though they move the ball a little bit, it's ultimately just really tough to find any kind of space against the zone. It's been a problem playing against Indiana all year, frankly. So I give
D'Angelo Bond's everywhere, by the way, not to cut you
everywhere.
off.
He had a really good
pass
game.
breakups. Yeah, he was very sticky. Yeah.
I give Indiana a lot of credit for what they did on defense. I also give Miami a lot of credit for what they did on offense as the game wore on. But to your point, can't have a bad half of offensive football against a team like Indiana, which just usually does not give you anything.
Which, by the way, they almost were able to weather a bad half against Indiana on offense. They were driving for the win in this game.
No.
Wild.
There was a big moment in this game. We're talking about the block punt for the touchdown.
Yeah.
That was a critical moment in this football game. It seemed as though this thing was relatively neck and neck. We've got a block kick. It comes about 5 minutes remaining in the third quarter, deep inside Miami territory, Miami's, own 15-yard line, whatever it was. Block kick goes back for a touchdown. That makes it 17-7. That gives Indiana a little bit more breathing room at a moment where it felt like after that Mark Fletcher long touchdown run, there was potential for Miami to get back in this thing. There were a couple moments in this one where it felt like either because of Miami's pressure or because of Miami's offense and some of what they were doing creatively on that side of the ball, that they were finding ways to spark some new momentum. There were a couple instances in this game where even though Miami lost, there was a never say die quality to what they were doing out there. They were not playing the big dumb Mario Cristobal. They weren't.
Well, early on,
but later on, they sort of threw that into the fire and they realized the situation and they were creative. They came back from the dead a couple times. They just couldn't do it when they needed to on that final drive. Carson Beck kind of gets fooled, kind of tries to make a throw that he just didn't put enough air on, underthrows it, ends up ending the game with an interception. So he tried. They tried to stretch the field, but they didn't have timeouts. And again, this zone was just so damn stingy that there was just not a whole lot of yardage to be had.
No. I couldn't agree more. It was a great game. Like the back and forth of it all was really, really good to see. You mentioned the chess match, like just the individual performances that we got from both of these teams sort of weirdly encapsulated everything we had seen from these teams this season, right? Yeah. The up and down nature of Miami and mistakes and bashing teams in up front, and the defensive, like, enormous improvement this season under Corey Heatherman and Carson Beck being like a steadying presence, the veteran presence for him, and the offensive line giving him a ton of time in these moments against a really fierce Indiana front. Malachi Tony being like the do everything guy, line him up creatively and see what he can do. So you got like the full encapsulation, obviously the turnover at the end of the game for Carson Beck and the Miami passing game. And then on Indiana's front, right, you get a little bit of the creativity. You get Fernando Mendoza's legs being killer in a huge moment. You get terrific play calling. You get the lack of mistakes and the lack of killer mistakes. You get the back shoulder stuff. You didn't get the rushing attack, which I think was underrated for, how you attribute Indiana's success this season. But you got the heady play up front from Indiana, the incredibly smart and physical play from the defensive backfield for the Hoosiers. So it was it was weirdly a complete performance that was sort of the microcosm of both of these teams' seasons. So you can't really hope for more beyond having a really fun back and forth, a competitive game between these teams. And I don't know, that's what we got. You know, you hope it doesn't end in like a back-breaking mistake. You just hope it ends with, you know, competitive play and it decides it one way or the other. But either way, it was a really fun watch, and we'll put it into context, I'm sure. Indiana's your national champion.
It's hard to get your head around this.
It is.
And we put out a video, we put out an episode a couple weeks ago where I tried to give voice to this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And as you might expect, the pushback from a lot of Indiana fans was, "Oh, you don't know ball. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know."
They've been college football fans for 18 months now. You got to listen.
And then there were other Indiana fans who chimed in, and they were like, well, "Listen, we knew we had a good team this year. We didn't know we were going to go 16-0 win the national championship.
How could you?"
And nobody in their right mind when Curt Cignetti took over. There were pictures floating around before this game from people who were in the stands for Curt Cignetti's first game as an Indiana coach in Bloomington. There was nobody in the stands whatsoever.
True.
So to go from that to where they are now in the span of 2 seasons is frankly unlike anything I think we've ever covered, certainly in the college football sense.
Agree.
But more broadly in a sports sense, I know this is another thing we've given a little bit of voice to. It is up there with some of the greatest sports stories of all time.
I agree.
It is. I mean, it is so improbable. If you had told us 5 years ago we would be here with Indiana winning, Indiana was the team you picked in the old college football dynasty as one of the bad teams to try and build them up.
Yeah.
I mean, truly.
Now, the only thing I'll push back on is maybe just the wording. This is not the Indiana roster that we saw 2 years ago. So it's not a like Bad News Bears, Mighty Ducks, like kiddie sports movie where it's a bunch of like the rejects who can't even skate, blah, 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 and figuring it out. Like it's as a program, as a college football story, as a sports story, a program going from the losingest to a national champion, and very much of these times being able to rebuild the roster. It is without a doubt in that conversation. But it's not like we're taking, you know, the Tom Allen roster and Curt Cignetti's just coaching them up into something incredible.
I mean, one of the things that you and I have talked about, and a mutual friend of ours, I remember you telling me the story that you got a text from him talking about how, is this really Indiana? Is it just a bunch of players with an Indiana logo on them? I mean, the transfer portal and NIL, and we don't need to drone on about how the game has changed. If people are listening to this, they already know that.
Indiana did a better job riding the wave of change than anybody else.
But I think the improbable nature of taking a program that has been a doormat and convincing enough quality talent to come there in spite of all that, that is the real genius of Signetti.
Yeah.
His ability to get these guys in as quickly as he did. Granted, 13 guys from JMU. His first year obviously was very successful. Still some of those guys around, but was more successful this time around, clearly in the transfer portal to assemble his roster in 2025-26 here. But the improbable nature of taking a program that's been this down and out, rebuilding it so quickly, and the pixie dust of getting guys to want to come to Indiana, I think is the hard part. Because it's just not a prestigious football program. Why would it be? The fact that he was able to do this as quickly as he did, the fact that they were as efficient, the fact that they were as surgical and clinical as they ended up being here in the very end against a very good team in the Miami Hurricanes. Their run this season, their run through the playoffs, I need more time to think about it, honestly, about what this means, because it to me just feels like I'm still pinching myself a little bit.
Look, if you're going to take stock of it, it's Curt Cignetti, who did not have an opportunity at a major place until last year, finds Cal's quarterback, Cal is best known for being like a team with funny fans last season.
Right.
They go 6-6, and I've heard stories about how the end of everything played out for Fernando Mendoza at Cal. I'm sure there's truth to all sorts of different stories about how everything went down, but Indiana identified him. I'm sure they were talking to others as well, helped to develop him this season. He was pretty good at Cal. He was a Heisman winner at Indiana. They identify Roman Hemby, who I looked up was like the 20th best Big Ten running back for Maryland in 2024. They've got the James Madison transfers, right? The school that Urban Meyer and Joel Klatt considered to be a safety issue, that James Madison players in the playoff, it's just not fair. And then you have Mikhail Kamara and D'Angelo Pons and Elijah Surratt dominating dudes. You have a road that includes consecutively beating Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon, and Miami. Teams with wall-to-wall NFL talent on both sides of the ball that didn't play for James Madison, that didn't play like Stephen Daly did for Kent State, right? That you have these dudes just playing as a team more efficiently and more murderously than any, is that a word? Yeah, I'd probably not.
Sure.
Than anybody in the country. And so their specific path is just so wild in the way that they did this, that they have to win 16 games and go 16-0 to do it, because they obviously go 12-0. They survived scares against Penn State, against Oregon, against Iowa, against Ohio State, and obviously, winning all of those games in close, impressive fashion. It's just, I can't fully wrap my mind around the odds that would take. He took him to the playoff in year one with a MAC quarterback with a beat up thumb and a torn ACL.
Right.
Loses a ton. Has Cal's quarterback, who led them to a 6-6 record, under center, taking snaps from a Notre Dame offensive lineman who Notre Dame said, "Hey, we like you, but you're not going to play here." And he goes in-state to Indiana, wins the Rose Bowl MVP, does he not, Pat Coogan?
Right.
On their way to winning the national championship in Miami against Miami. And beating, Oregon by 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, whatever it was, 5 touchdowns, beating Alabama by 5 touchdowns. It's just, when you start stacking the bullet points of what Indiana did to get here, you start saying to yourself, historically, what are we talking about here with college football? They don't have the NFL receivers of like recent Alabama and LSU monsters the last 5-6 years, right? They don't have the physical talent at quarterback of like Cam Newton or any of those. But all of their players were just a little bit more polished more often than any team. And to do it 16 times, to be unbeaten, I don't know, man. Any modern conversation about best team now has to include this team squarely in it.
I also think more broadly, the fact that let's be honest, non-blue blood won the national championship is really meaningful.
Yeah.
For a lot of people now. It probably wasn't meaningful in terms of TV ratings, because I don't think this is going to draw a big number.
Right.
But that's sort of beside the point. It wasn't all that long ago you and I would go on after the national championship and do a stream like this. And the response that we would get from people, first off, people didn't download it.
Right.
And secondly, among those that did, or among those that watch-alongs that we did, there was almost this sense of inevitability. There was almost this sense of, oh yeah, this was a foregone conclusion at the start of the year, that Georgia, that Alabama, that Ohio State was going to win the national championship.
Right.
And Indiana winning might not be for everybody, but I do think it's a pretty significant moment where we're at now. It signifies where we're at now in college football, that because of the transfer portal, because of NIL, because of all of these new factors that you didn't have to consider a decade ago, stories like this are possible. How sustainable is it? I mean, Indiana's kind of done this 2 years in a row now. We'll see what they're able to do next year, what kind of a program they're able to build moving forward. The sustainability of building through the portal is still, I think, very much in question. But the fact that Signetti was able to do it 2 years in a row and take, again, a program that's been one of, if not the worst historic programs in all of FBS and get them to this point now is just sort of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And for people like you and I who cover this, for people in our Discord and our community who I know care about college football and often root for the underdog, we started getting questions this week about when do we start rooting against Indiana with how hard they've played and how hard they've been to beat. Yeah. That's a conversation for another day. But the fact that this is possible is, I think, the biggest takeaway if you're a college football fan, if you like the sport, if you don't care about Indiana or Miami or anybody. But the fact that you can have this happen is, I think, a much needed dose of like variability in the sport. To have a new team in it means that it's possible for a bunch of new teams that haven't been anywhere close to it in the past. And that in and of itself, I think, is kind of exciting.
I mean, I guess, and to a certain extent, you're right. Ole Miss ends up in the Final Four, and they had never done anything in terms of the playoff or the BCS era, or it's been a long time. It is possible. Ole Miss certainly in the last few years has been more advantaged than Indiana, though. There is part of me that when I hear you say that, you're like, this is possible via the portal, via NIL, via like the changing landscape of college football. It's possible to find a guy to get your affairs in order and get your roster together and to be detail oriented and to just be a killer. It's happened once in the history of this sport.
Yeah, but it's possible. And he got him to the playoffs 2 years in a row. And whatever he is doing with his portal talent is clearly different than what other places are doing. I mean, because and this is not to dunk on Oregon, but who gets more transfers in Oregon?
I hear you.
Oregon got blown out by this team. And they had better talent across the board. I would argue
maybe
the talent on that team that probably has a much higher ceiling than a lot of the guys playing in Indiana. But that's beside the point. They got drilled by Indiana. So it's not all a talent thing. A lot of it's coaching. Whatever pixie dust Curt Cignetti has sprinkled on this Indiana program, it's truly remarkable. And I think it's a good thing for the sport. I'm sure people will grow tired of Curt Cignetti before long. Not Indiana fans, but fans of everybody else in the Big Ten and around college football if they keep doing this. But here we sit today. I guess it's now January the 20th as we record this. We've got a new national champion, the Indiana Hoosiers. Let me take a step back. What does this mean now for Miami? Having made it to this game at home, wind at their back, home crowd, this could have been the culmination for the Cristobal era, for getting Miami back to previous heights. It had been, 25 years since they won a national championship. I guess 24, 23 years since they last played and won against Ohio State. To get this close to not be able to get over the hump, obviously, is going to be crushing, especially since it was at home. But I think just as a proof of concept, the fact that they were able to work their way through this tournament. First off, they almost didn't make it. Mm-hmm. But secondly, the fact that they did as a 10 seed, they beat a bunch of good teams. They made it to this game. They ran into a juggernaut. How do you feel if you're a Miami fan right now once the disappointment wears off?
Good is probably too strong a word. I mean, encouraged, obviously, dramatically encouraged that Mario Cristobal can build a roster via high school recruiting and the portal, can hire coaches. Obviously, the hires of Shannon Dawson and Corey Heatherman. Shannon Dawson helps to lead the #1 offense in America last season, and the defense was dramatically improved. And on all three levels, there are huge playmakers via the portal and via high school recruiting and development, that the progress has been exceptional on both sides of the ball, that the offensive line is going to be great for years to come, that Darian Mensah is going to build the greatest ski chalet that the Swiss Alps have ever seen. You can't imagine how finely appointed the rugs will be in Darian Mensah's Swiss ski chalet.
Oh my God.
No, that things are, Mario Cristobal's vision has come to life. And you have to be thrilled by it, that he's a Miami guy, that he understands it. He's a recruiting killer, especially up front. As you like to say, what does he build it from the inside out, Ty? That's drink if you ever hear somebody talk about Miami and Mario Cristobal building from the inside out, because that's a novel concept. Only Mario Cristobal knows how to do that. That they're going to be an absolute national force moving forward. And, you know, you can grow frustrated with some of the undisciplined elements of where Miami was this year, but this is proof of concept. Yeah. And, you know, they're going to have to keep finding quarterbacks. And if they're going to spend, they're going to keep finding quarterbacks. But beyond that, we'll see what they look like with coaching turnover, with coordinator coaching turnover. And I don't know. I think they are the clear team in the ACC moving forward, especially now that they took the ACC champions quarterback from underneath their roster. So, yeah, Miami is the absolute, you know, top of the line in that conference and should be a perennial playoff contender moving forward.
I mean, Miami's going to lose a lot. They're going to lose a lot before
Players,
next season.
Not games. Yeah.
Correct. You know, losing those edge rushers will hurt.
CC Mauigoa, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of beef that's going to be walking out. But you still got Malachi Toney, for at least 2 more seasons. It looks as if it's going to be Darian Mensah at quarterback. There's enough to build on here, and to the point, this is Cristobal's vision come to life. This was a team that, you know, as it's a program that's been amassing talent, and he's been doing a really good job of it. They have been slowly building. I think, given the state of affairs in the ACC, if you're a Miami fan, it's a very realistic expectation to expect that you'll be back in the playoff and get another bite at the apple next year.
Yeah.
And so for as disappointing as it is to lose this game at home and to have a team this good with a pass rush and a defense this good and not be able to convert, I think Miami is going to get several more opportunities in the years to come. So I would, after the disappointment wears off, probably hang my hat on that.
Sure.
Because Cristobal has proven at every stage, you can say what you want about him trying to play bully ball and some of the conservative decisions that he has made in spots. Dude knows how to recruit, and he knows how to recruit to the offensive and defensive lines.
Right.
He is an offensive lineman at heart. So he cares about the trenches. And yes, drink, when you build from the inside out, that tends to be a pretty sustainable way to go about doing your business. So I'm encouraged by Miami getting to this game. I'm encouraged by how they didn't wilt when they went down a few scores. I'm encouraged by how they sort of made adjustments on the fly. It was apparent if you watched the game. So there's a lot of good here on the Miami side. They just, a couple key moments went against them. The punt block, obviously the turnover late. Penalties, just a few.
Third, fourth,
a few. It's tough to even call them dumb things. They're just sort of like incidental things that happen throughout the course of a football game that went against Miami. And if a few things break in their direction, maybe we're having a different conversation here.
So, okay, so now we have a Miami program that will have not championship expectations, because there have always been championship expectations, but supported proof of concept championship expectations for Mario Cristobal, right? So now you're operating under the umbrella of, okay, you have shown us that you can lead us to that championship conversation. What is your next move? What are your next 2 moves? What are the games that we shouldn't be losing anymore that we're losing or not losing? That kind of thing, right? That now it's all in a different context now. Miami hadn't been to the playoff. Now they're a championship contender in the last drive. Similarly, now Indiana fans expect a championship contender. Not championships every year.
Once you fly first class, Dan.
Once you fly first class, 19B doesn't quite cut it in the same way. And so Indiana fans know the drill. They know how this team is going to be built in the short term. I assume that Curt Cignetti is going to, I mean, they do try and succeed in the high school ranks as well, but we understand where the focus has been and will continue to be with, you know, bringing in guys like Nick Marsh and Josh Hoover, guys like that. So the expectation now for Indiana fans, and I think rightfully so, is they've got to be a 10-ish win program moving forward. Right? You're not saying championship or bust every year,
No.
but you're saying, okay, you've exclusively gone to the college football playoff, and it looks like we're expanding, if not this year, in the coming couple or whatever.
Right.
So Indiana, as now like an 8-4 program, is going to grow really unacceptable really fast.
Yeah.
So I don't expect it. How Indiana got to this point tells me that they're not going to be an 8-4 program anytime soon, but they got to hit on these transfers every year. They got to hit on Josh Hoover. They got to hit on whoever they're bringing in to replace the James Madison players that Signetti brought with him to Bloomington. So that's going to be the interesting thing. Can he make this style work forever? Who am I to say no? But that's the question now for Indiana fans. Not style, but this method of roster building, program building, and development. I have nothing to stand on when he won a national championship in 2 years. So that's going to be the question now. Playing with expectations, playing with, okay, you're in a conference with Ohio State and whatever Michigan's going to be under Kyle Whittingham, Matt Campbell's Penn State, Dan Lanning's Oregon, Lincoln Riley's USC, Kirk Ferentz's Iowa, whatever. You take your pick. There are pretty good to really good teams in this conference. I'm not terribly worried about Pat Fitzgerald and Michigan State. Happy to be proven wrong there. But this is new context for Indiana. It's not just a cute story when you go through Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon, Miami. This is a force now.
Yeah.
And so now Indiana expects something in the vicinity of a force moving forward. And that's definitely different for Indiana football fandom.
Yeah, I mean, I think back a couple of years when it was Georgia against TCU out in LA. And you and I were out there. We did a live show out there. And I remember we met a bunch of TCU fans, and the prevailing thought was that they were going to get creamed by Georgia.
Right.
And the TCU people that we talked to were just happy to be there. They're like, we're playing with house money. This is incredible. To be in this game very early on in the Sonny Dykes tenure, right? I mean, this was awesome. They were thrilled by that.
I can't believe Max Duggan told us that, but continue.
But you think of how different the mentality was this time around. Now, different situations. It's not apples to apples. But this was an Indiana team. This was a fan base that expected to win this game.
Yeah.
And so whereas some of the TCU conversations we had, I remember asking people, well, what happens after this? What are your expectations after this? And nobody really had a good answer. They were just happy to be there. Like, well, hopefully it continues. We'll see where it goes from here. It is a much different conversation on the Indiana side, to your point.
Yeah.
There's going to be now a new base level expectation. And I think that's dangerous when you've got a huge alumni base like Indiana does, the largest in the country.
They're going to spend like they expected.
They're going to spend. There are people that want to help boost this program further. It is a big school in the Midwest. Just because they have not been big in football, they were big in basketball for a long time. Everybody knows that. But clearly this is an Indiana program now, an Indiana just in general institution that has a lot to give to the program if they see this paying off. And so my hunch is that the resources will be there. Obviously, they feel pretty good about the coach they have in place and the talent that they're bringing in. I think it's entirely realistic to expect that they can get back to just that 10-win plateau. The 10-win plateau is sort of the watermark, or the benchmark, I should say.
Yeah.
That's where you want to get if you want to try and get in this playoff. You don't need to win all the games like they did this year. But
for now, I mean, you can go 9-3 and finish 20th, and you might make the playoff next year.
Yeah. Unbelievable. So I just think to put it in perspective, what Indiana did here, it's certainly one of the better college football stories that we've covered. One of the best that I can remember. It's up there in the conversation with some of the best sports stories that I can remember. Just this quick turnaround in such a short period of time to get to the height of college football. It's pretty cool. So congratulations to the Indiana Hoosiers. Congratulations to Curt Cignetti, Fernando Mendoza. So Mark Cuban was there. Congratulations to him. I guess he's throwing in for NIL as well.
Your girl, Abella Danger, was, unfortunately rooting for.
Yeah. Sure.
Man.
Yep.
Continue. Sorry.
But an incredible story, man. I don't know. I don't even know what else to say.
Indiana's schedule next year, by the way. Ohio State and USC at home. and they are at Michigan, at Washington, at Nebraska. That was my first glance. Big Ten schedule is not out yet in terms of when are bye weeks, when is so-and-so playing so-and-so. So the chronology of Indiana's schedule is not out yet. Miami has Notre Dame on the road in South Bend. They're at Clemson, to whatever extent that is meaningful in 2026. And they have Pitt and Florida State at home. Otherwise, pretty great schedule for Miami to rebuild and stack up a bunch of wins.
Indiana is your national champion, 27-21. They put the bow on a 16-0 season, the first ever in the history of college football.
Yes.
Congratulations to you. Congratulations to me. We made it through another season. I honestly don't even know how many it's been for us. It's been a long time that you and I have been doing this, and this was one of the better seasons. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Congratulations again to the Verballers out there who I know enjoyed the season with us and hung with us, and hopefully got their money's worth if they support us on Patreon, or even if they don't, even if they're just getting it for free. Hopefully, congratulations to you guys for staying the course with us.
Not even just congratulations. Thank you.
Well, that
you've
too.
been killer all season long, whether or not you've participated in the games on Patreon and been behind the scenes with us on Patreon, or subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have not, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're watching us there. If you've subscribed to the audio feed, the newsletter, whatever, your support is everything. And Ty and I are eternally grateful. Could not do this, quite literally could not do this without you. This is what we do. We pour our heart and soul into this every day. We started studying for this season in June, mid-June, late June. Yeah. It's currently, the real feel is negative 400 outside in wintertime here in the Midwest. Yeah. So it's a slog in the best way. And what keeps our heads above water is everybody who seems to enjoy the show, even if it means your team isn't good this year, even if it means your team crushes your heart, even if it means your team won the national championship, even if we argued in YouTube comments, even if Ty convinced you after sending a mean message to our inbox to that we can still be friends. Like, it's incredibly meaningful, the relationship we have with all of you. We don't take it for granted. And it's been 47 years doing this show, and we can't wait for number 48.
I also want to give a shout out to other people who do stuff like this, other people who are in the college football content game.
Sure.
There are a lot of good shows. We happen to like ours the most. Obviously, we're a little bit biased, but there are a lot of good shows, many of which you've heard of, more of which you haven't.
Right.
There are a lot of people doing this for love of the game.
Yeah.
And it can be a grind. It can be a grind. Covering this day in and day out, things change at a moment's notice. It's a lot. And so there are a lot of good people out there who care about this sport, who put their heart and soul into it. And we are two of many, but it is a pleasure to be in their company as well. So a big shout out and congratulations to everybody who is kind of doing the same thing we are and putting their blood, sweat, and tears into it. It's always cool to go out there and look to see what's going on in the community. So that does it. Congratulations again to Indiana. We will be doing our next episode. It drops on Thursday. From this point forward, throughout the offseason, 2 episodes a week.
Yes.
Please do support us by hitting follow or subscribe. We would love to have you with us through the long, cold offseason. We promise we will make it worth your while. If you want to support what Dan and I do, help us keep the lights on, you could go on out to patreon.com/solidverbal or go to verballers.com. Either or will get you over to the Patreon. We'd love to have you. We absolutely would love to have you. We've already started work on some of the cool things we're going to be doing for next year, so we'll talk about those in due course. But for the meantime, we got to celebrate this for Indiana, man.
Definitely.
16-0, 27-21. That is your final score.
And later in the week, it will be our exhaustive Pinstripe Bowl recap.
For that guy over there, my good friend Dan Rubenstein, for myself over here in Eastern PA, thank you as always for downloading, for listening, for supporting. It has been a pleasure to be with you this season. One more time, congratulations to Indiana. We'll talk to y'all in a few days. Stay solid.
Peace. And thank you to everybody who sent in super chats.
Yes, thank you for that.
We can't really talk about YouTube comments while we're doing.
I know it's hard.
It's
I see it on the screen. I don't know
Thank
what to do.